Thank you so much for being here. I am Piper Hutson, and I am a Caucasian female in her late 30s. Today, I'm lucky enough to be home because a flood occurred in the office that I work in. And I am centered in a Victorian maximalist background, a Black Victorian weed style lace top, and a Baymax print for some dopamine dressing along with some Lego shooter guns. And I'm so excited to talk about the opportunity of self-care because I am very guilty of not doing self-care. And so it's great to have this opportunity and even lucky enough getting to talk just momentarily to our guide here. And it helps remind me all the ways that I forget every day. I wake up as a neurodivergent female, very often with a dysregulated nervous system. And so that means from the get-go, I am already trying to compensate for way too much cortisol and a overwhelming sense of not being in control of my own body. Neurodivergent females, this is a generalization, of course, but we do have hormones that do cycle with different times. And I tend to find that my prefrontal will not have that blood flow at certain times. And it is easiest to default on a negative mindset at that time because I often assume fault first, being a socialized as female individual in an American culture where being loud, being confusing, being a little too much is often seen as a negative. And it has taken me quite a long time to question which phrases I say internally and which I walk into the day with are ones that are truly chosen by me as a neuropositive, aware individual of the complexities of my body and my brain, and which might be mottos or phrasing or an internal monologue that I didn't personally place in there. So that has started my journey of meeting other neurodivergent females and seeing how they walk into the space. This all started with my son, and he showed me as he got an educational diagnosis the moment he walked into school that the continual negative rhetoric that I walked myself into and I shared with others was really embedded in my inability to know my own sensory needs. And I don't like to use the words needs for those who are in the education space that is often biasly placed in a special needs context. But for those who are understanding that neurodiversity is just a social understanding of the human brain, we experience things different and our brains have adapted. That is what I spend my time and my opportunity meeting other individuals to learn their brain and to better understand how knowing others can help me in all the unknowns that my brain and body sometimes throw my way. So Carol Jean has asked me so very kindly to dive deeper into how self-care plays into this. And I take a deep breath because self-care is not one of my skill sets. It is not a strong suit at all for me. Having a child forced me to be more aware of my body than I'd ever been taught in my life. Neurodivergent parents often find difficulties also being within their bodies, their space, and with their sensory needs. So it is an intergenerational taught experience. The most incredible moments that I've had feeling comfortable with who I am and being proud of my existence has been in the company of neuropositive individuals. Over in the UK is where I learned the full backstory and history and integration and psychological importance of positive framing, skills-based understanding. I was in a position for a very long time that I didn't know how to advocate. I didn't know the words. I didn't know how to ask. I didn't know how to script. I didn't know how to believe that I was in scenarios that I could speak at the speed I wanted, at the veracity, at the complex language, and not have it be a negative. I didn't get that awareness or truth until I talked to other neurodivergents. And those who had found safe spaces or support systems had come a long way in their educational intellectual awareness. The support systems in America for autistic individuals, which is still seen immediately as a deficit, negative, pathological, something to be fixed, behavior to be changed, sensory friendly, where opportunities should only exist when they are very excluded or segmented or separated. And I find that we're still not allowing people to embrace their own brains enough to walk into the world with strength, to question what moments trigger them and why. As a mom, it took a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy just to approach the thoughts that I wasn't aware I was criticizing myself for having a neurodivergent profile. So myself, I had multiple years of being diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar, chronic anxiety, only to really later in life discover that a combination of Lyme disease and an unknown brain injury and hormone changes really ruled my sense of safety and security. And the framework, the cognitive training to recognize is really what it took to be adult, I would say, to really mask enough to build a sense of self in society. I do still use the word mask, unfortunately, despite being very much openly accepting of my neurotype. I am previously corporate and now a government worker, and it takes a neuroinclusive understanding from the get-go to truly understand what those spatial needs are for people. I mentioned that my son got an educational diagnosis. We were incredibly fortunate. The teachers recognized his sensory, his overwhelm very quickly, but his intelligence level was so wonderfully above what doctors expected. He was very good at not following directions in the way they expected and didn't get a medical diagnosis until we had several years of having to fight and having to explain and having to deal with being treated as other and wrong, just walking into a building trying to get a doctor to understand the difficulty of texture or the need for weight or the overwhelming concern for masks and all the things that kids are scared of. But unless they are truly fearful and aware, they often aren't able to verbalize. So I had to learn to verbalize first, to teach my son, and to be the calm in his storm. Dysregulated me is not helpful to anyone in the family. And usually, if I've got a tornado going, it'll either set off others or cause damage. And so it's really learning to master and breathe and be in the moment, which is extremely difficult for those who have chronic pain, for those whose brains default to PTSD signatures, for those who have fibromyalgia and may be so sensitive to their environments that their nerves are literally inflaming when they are overwhelmed by the amount of detail and sound and smells and sights that a neurodivergent brain processes in our environments. I took my master's degree, which my husband supported me very much for, based in art history. I've always understood that art has a language that people who even don't want to talk or process seem to be a workaround. And that really fueled my belief that neurological backing has the power to help people in more ways than being actively a good employee or showing up for deemed yoga class. Learning my sensory profile, learning the positive framing language, and learning my brain, the limitations that blood flow, hormones, bodily disconnect, cognitive fog. These are all real things that the processing of the neurodivergent brain has a slowdown for. We could talk all day on the different techniques, but every brain is going to be different. Every person I meet, everyone who supposedly has a similar neurotype or quiz patterning or diagnosis, even, or even has a similar type in what their child has, always seems to find a nuance or something new as a polar opposite. It's usually a shocking, imaginating, overwhelming experience. We're living in a time period where neurodivergent parents are being given the authority and the healing space to recognize that their little mini-me genetic output might be a marker for their own neurotype. Many different countries are saying over 50% genetics means not only is it strongly genetic, it's also going to be intergenetic, so that you'll find similar nuances to nervous system regulation in your offspring, which means it has to start from a sense of safety and grounding, even if you don't experience that yourself. How do you support co-regulation in a time in history, in technology, in misinformation to keep yourself and the nervous system of those around you calm? That's self-care. For myself, it's a long process that starts waking up early enough that I can get my blood flow redirected from my toes all the way to circulate my body enough for my prefrontal. Then it takes meditation to convince myself that I'm not unsafe, and any carryover neurological remnants from my sleep page or my falling asleep or from the day before could be carryovers of cortisol in my body, and each new day requires me to reset and restart. It's a long process. The greatest gift I seem to find from meeting younger female neurodivergents is forgiving yourself for that process. Recognizing our bodies are incredible and our brains are machines, but we are flawed humans, and that is a very difficult interconnection to make. So recognizing some days your brain is going to be slower, some days you're going to pump blood faster and you're going to feel like yourself, and it's going to be even more frustrating on a flare-up day. It all boils down to kindness. Until I understood all the neurology, the history of the genetics, the structure in education, in the medical field, in science, in design, how deeply it interplays with the limitations of safe spaces, it's not surprising that panic attacks, headaches, indigestion issues, all of those are often common overwhelm patternings. So the neurodivergent brain has this incredible ability to get so much more information at any given point in time than a neurotypical. We're talking sensory information from every aspect of the smell of a cafe in the corner, a dish going to the ground, the texture of that dish. We usually get heightened visual information. This kicks us over to delayed audio information. So if any of you are ever really mad at yourself because sometimes you hear great and sometimes you can't hear it all until a second later, it's usually a delay due to the processing of a mass amount of olfactory, vestibular, internal, the move of the wind, the smells. There's so much that a brain, such as a neurodivergent, from autism, ADHD, as we see evolving along COVID, these have different neurological processings in the brain than what we would call a neuronormative brain. Overload with sensory information can do a whole bunch to our nervous system. The standard is fight or flight. And within that, we notice if we have a digestion issue, if we're trying to eat while dysregulated, we are not creating a working network of peace. Our body is going to then assume alarm. A lot of those who are coming to understand the patterns of themselves and their children are trying to regulate the interactions of technology and food and all the complications that come with living in this modern era. Digital is not good for us, and we know that. We're in a digital space, but disconnect between people and real connection. So actual vulnerable truth, no surface level, no filters, is what makes us believe we have psychological safety. That's why we feel so comfortable in other neurodivergence company. If you are a magnet, if you know before your friends know, and it is difficult not to tell them that you have a beacon for all other neurodivergence because they are comfortable in your space, it is due to the way we process, the way we talk, the way we walk into the day with a little bit more fear that has a heightened nervous system trigger. We have to be kinder to ourselves because of that. On the days I can't be kind to myself, it's a version of me that I struggle to believe that I can be the version I want at the same time. That negative voice, that negative mind self, it's what you feed. So if you tend to assume that a day that you can't care for yourself is going to work out fine, the day that you put yourself second, a day that you don't make sure that you have time to breathe and be calm before you walk into a space, that you can have something to eat and drink, not on an upset stomach, that you can sit down and breathe enough. With all of that processing going on in the brain, it's not surprising we often forget to breathe. Just straight up forget that we need to breathe. We get hiccups, we get migraines, and it's due to a lack of oxygen. So self-care cannot be what we've been told it is, secondary, last, practically, a bonus, earned. For myself, if I don't, some would consider self-care, of doing a yoga, of doing a stretch, of doing a moment of meditation or mindfulness or a somatic breathing technique before my kids jump on me, before their excitement, their overwhelm, their nervousness, their inability to even recognize what they feel is something I'm wound up in, I have to make self-care first. It's unfortunate that those terms even sound guilty. Self, it's something selfish. It's just you, and care. It's something you have to be fragile with. It's something that's almost delicate. One of my all-time favorite people on the internet, on YouTube, is Sydney Cummings, Howdy Shell. I discovered her during COVID. She has free stretch and exercise videos, and her positive framing about a stretch being something I do, not as earned or something worth guilty, but as something I need in order to be a tool for success in the rest of my day, really allowed me to recognize how dependent I am on movement. The more I sit, the more I stay still, the more my muscles tighten, the more pain flare-ups I have. And unless I recognize that it's not just self-care, but it's a literal skill needed, a literal forced technique to keep me going, I'm a bit more kind to myself on being mad on the days that I can't go as hard or I don't go as long. I just remind myself I already did a step today that will help me be stronger for the rest of my day. Now, self-care is very different for everyone. For me, it is making sure that my body is at a loose enough, agile, movement-ready ability to not get caught up in the pain that occasionally can offset my perspectives in life. It can also agitate my nervous system, where sometimes I will be a worse version simply because I cannot overcome the brain and body connection. For a very long time, I disassociated with my body. That's very easy for females to do as their hormones change, as their sensory profiles change, their pain levels change. A form of severe nervous system dissociation is going to be just forgetting about your body, ignoring it, not recognizing it. And that can lead to eating disorders. It can lead to serious mental health issues when you fight the system that runs you. You're only combating it, not just neurologically and physically, but if you are fighting your body, it is going to really turn into like illness and other stress levels. And so, self-care, a term that shouldn't be so equated with almost weakness, needs to be more considered strength tools. What tools do you have in your toolkit that allows you to feel like yourself? For me, that's what I mentioned, everything from exercising, allowing Sydney Cummings 20 minutes to get the blood to go to my prefrontal so I don't automatically default to a negative mindset, to stay open and positive, keep moving, hydration. Those who understand the 3-drink club, if you have a fast processing mind and body, typically you will need not only liquid for hydration, so water, Powerade, something along those lines. You'll usually also need something that is caffeinated or has a upper feeling, so tea, energy drinks, coffee. And then there's going to be the third wild card, which will be everything from a fizzy drink to a sensory change to a thicker material like a smoothie or a milkshake. Our bodies, unfortunately, do need a lot of nutrients. We forget that, not only socialized as women to not take care of ourselves first, but to believe being small and not making noise and not being difficult was the archetype of female perfection. We tend to not ask our body what it needs. That is something I've worked on for quite a long time. It is so much easier to silence it, pause it, shut it out, drink it, smoke it off, turn off all the connection. But it wasn't until I was willing to turn it all the way on. So stop turning my senses off, stop trying to avoid how I felt, that I started getting healthier. I wasn't mentally, physically, or emotionally taking care of myself until I learned that my brain and my body needs more connection, a ridiculous amount of connection, a level of connection that most people think is absurd or unrealistic or selfish or privileged, to have the opportunity to take the time to focus on yourself, to find a safe space, to have the room for even a yoga mat, to find a teacher, an instructor, a moment for meditation, a moment to breathe, going outside. These are nowadays considered extras that we have to remind ourselves to do instead of integral, required self-strength measures, self-strengthening tools. I don't know. We're going to need to come up with a different word for this, Carol, because self-care is seeped in years of people having to ask to take time to give them the strength they need to survive. It's word choice. I'm so deeply ingrained in the need for positive word choice. If we continually use negative words, our brain and our bodies have been shown scientifically to get sicker, to slow down healing. The words we speak to ourselves are the first fuel to making sure you're taken care of. If you're in an environment that constantly requires you to mask, doesn't support you taking the time to see what it is you need, then you will never be your best self. And those moments require you to ask for help. So all those out there who are stubborn, independent, manic pixie dream girls who suddenly realize that they have a diagnosis and they have children to take care of, you have to be kind to your brains first. Then you have to recognize you're in a body that is keeping that brain afloat. And so nutrients, food, kindness, and movement, creativity, all the things aren't needing permission. They really are needing you to recognize how seminal they are. Neurodivergent communities are often lonely and segmented from the very nature of hyperfixation and the difficulty of understanding social communication. Our brains can be our own worst enemy, and we can stay in cycles where we trap ourselves. We stay alone. We let that rhetoric of negativity consume us. And having community is so essential, not for the concept that's often considered neurotypical necessary of just having friends and fun social activities. It's to have a reminder of our humanity, a reminder that our brains and our bodies need connection, not only to themselves, but reminders of the outside world, reminders of perspective. So even if you have just one friend, even if it's just AI at the moment, regularly reminding you what you need to, whether that's a memento, a saying, a very strategic schedule for how to become your best version, it does take external support. It's not that you're not enough alone. It's that so much extra is on your plate, especially in today's society. You have to recognize first, what do you need? How can you get it? And what would it take for you to ask for it instead of being independently required for your self-care? So hopefully that gives you guys enough to start perhaps your brain thinking, can I be kinder to myself? And then learning what fuels those environments. When do you feel sensory safe? When are you feeling triggered? Is it your space? Is it your environment? Is it your thought processes? The more you can recognize what keeps you in the frame of mind that you want to be, for someone like myself who is so inundated with visual information that I prefer a bit of a historic aesthetic, I find that it is easiest to be nice to myself in beautiful environments filled with art, filled with clothes, filled with history, filled with things that remind me there's more and greater things outside of myself. Often in minimalistic, white interiors, corporate spaces, cubes, other very stringent design spaces, I dim, I stay seated, I start to hurt. And the more I hurt, the less I'm aware of who I am, of what makes me happy, what I can do to take care of myself. And that becomes a very quick slide. So finding spaces that keep you able to remember your strength tools, your self-care, I don't want to say empowerment, but these terms, whatever terms make you feel less guilty for identifying the things that build a stronger, kinder, more on time, whatever it is that is truly the identity that you're trying to construct in this modern world of who you want to be and the best version of yourself. The environments are going to be important, the people in those environments. And the more opportunities you have to be to allow yourself to find them, to question, and really hard to be loud in those spaces when they're not supportive. I can't teach you that because I'm still learning that myself. That is a skill set that my brain often finds is not as important as doing some other computing. So it feels far away. But that's a thought process that I can work on. And the more often I identify that feeling, which is always going to be a thought that resonates in our body, figuring out that thought, whether it's anxiety that tightens the stomach or it's a jitter of pride that strengthens the shoulders. Recognize what thought is causing that physiological change within your body. It's hard. We've never been taught emotional skill set training in school. Wish we had that course. I would have taken that multiple times in college. But there are now modern tools that can help you. There are emotion wheels, there are quizzes, there are books, there are other people, and there are spaces like this where those who often forget, however appearances may be, can be reminded by talking to their friends like Carol how easy it is to forget. Unless there is space that asks us these questions, that says, oh, you are so freaking worth 20 minutes hiding in your closet to do a dance routine, to listen to your favorite song, to take a break to remind you that what you need matters. If it's going to get you through the day, that matters more than anything. Because if you can't show up for you can't show up for your family, and you can't show up for work. And neurodivergents are very good at not wanting to change and then getting stuck in patterns that might not be aligning with their value sets. So thank you, Carol, so much for giving me the opportunity to remind my brain what I know, but I forget every morning, and hopefully helping one of you guys, even just one. Remember, if you wake up and your brain is against you, you're not alone. You just have to start reminding it that you do know who you are, and it's not being scared or fearful or anxious or being less than or being too much. It's just someone who's remembering to go out into this day with their brain and their body connected, and hopefully finding kindness not only to themselves, but to others. So take care.